Captain Elias Reese sat alone in the observation room. The glass wall showed stars in every direction, but he wasn't looking at them. His mind was full of questions. What had happened with the Aeliari princess? Why did she tremble after the handshake? He was a trained diplomat, not a fool. He had studied over 50 alien cultures, but none of his books or training could explain what he saw in Virelia's eyes before she walked away. Not anger, not fear, something deeper, something almost human. Suddenly, the door opened. A Concord official entered, followed by an Aeliari figure, tall and glowing like cut crystal. This one was older, slower, and wore a silver crest that marked him as a high advisor. Captain Elias Reese, the Concord official said. This is Advisor Cerex of the Aeliari Empire. He will speak on behalf of Princess Virelia. Elias stood quickly. I meant no harm. Cerex tilted his head. His voice rang like a wind chime. We know. That is why you are not being punished. Elias relaxed slightly, but his shoulders stayed tense. Then why is she trembling? The advisor paused as if choosing his words carefully. Our species, Cerex said, does not feel emotions the way yours does. Long ago we were emotional like you, but over centuries we evolved to focus on logic, calm, and reason. We built a society with no war, no hate, no pain, but also no fire. Elias frowned. You lost your feelings. We silenced them, Cerex said. They became too dangerous. But some of us still have the old ways inside, especially the royal family. The princess is one of them. Elias's mind turned quickly. Then the handshake. You touched her, Cerex said, his voice quiet now. And in that moment she felt everything you were feeling. That is how Aeliari empathy works. Physical contact unlocks deep connection. For us it is like opening the mind completely. No lies, no secrets. Elias stepped back. So, she saw my thoughts? No, not thoughts, Cerex said. She felt your emotions, fully, deeply, your curiosity, your respect, your stubbornness, your fear, your pride in being human. She felt all of it at once. Elias sat down slowly, stunned. I didn't know, I just meant to greet her. Cerex gave a slight bow. And that is why she asks to see you again. Elias looked up, surprised. She does? She is curious, Cerex said. No human has ever touched an Aeliari. No Aeliari has ever reacted this way. She wants to understand what you are. The next day, Elias was brought to a quiet garden inside the Concord station. It was made for calm meetings, soft lights, slow-moving, water and strange trees with glowing leaves. Virelia was already there, sitting by the water. Her colors were soft, gentle blue and silver. She looked up as Elias entered. He bowed slightly. Princess. She gave a small nod. Captain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias sat across from her. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, she said quietly. You caused confusion and wonder. Elias tilted his head. What did you feel when I touched your hand? She looked into the water. A storm, fire and wind, a deep ache for connection and hope. Elias blinked. Hope? Virelia's light shimmered softly. Your emotions were wild, uncontrolled, but honest. We have lived in silence for too long. You, humans, carry feelings like a flame. You don't hide them. You burn with them. Elias smiled a little. That's kind of true. We feel everything, even when we don't want to. Virelia looked at him closely. And yet you survive. You build, you fight, you dream. You reach for the stars with hearts full of chaos. Elias shrugged. It's not easy. We've made mistakes. Wars, pollution, greed. But we keep trying. We don't give up. For the first time, Virelia leaned forward slightly. I want to understand more. May I shake your hand again? Elias hesitated. Will it hurt you? I do not fear pain, she said. I fear forgetting what I felt. Slowly, he extended his hand again. This time, she took it without delay. A pulse of light moved through her body. Her colors danced across her skin. Deep red, warm orange, bright gold. She trembled, but her eyes stayed clear. This time, she didn't pull away. When she finally let go, she was breathing harder, but she smiled, just slightly. I saw your memory, she whispered. A dog. Injured. You carried it 3 miles. To a clinic. Elias blinked. I'd forgotten that. I didn't, she said. She stood slowly, graceful and strong. Your kind feels deeply, and yet you choose to help, to care, to protect. That is beautiful. At that moment, one of her guards rushed in. Your Highness, he said, the council has heard of your meeting. They are demanding you return to the Aeliari embassy. They say the human is too dangerous. Virelia turned to Elias. Dangerous emotions, that is what they fear, but I think it is time we stopped fearing what we once were. Elias rose. If I've caused trouble? No, she said firmly. You've started something important. She turned to leave, but looked over her shoulder once more. I don't know what will happen next, Captain Reese, but I want you to know. When I touched your hand, I didn't feel a weapon. I felt something powerful, something we lost long ago. And with that, she left the garden, her steps stronger now. Elias stood alone again. But this time, he didn't feel alone at all. Part 3. Fire Beneath the Glass. The galaxy had not stopped talking since the handshake. News of the event spread fast across the Concord. Every species had an opinion. Some called Elias Reese a threat. Others called him a miracle. Many were simply confused. But one thing was clear. Humans could not be ignored anymore. In the center of it all stood Princess Virelia. She had not spoken to the Concord Council since her second meeting with Elias. Instead, she stayed inside the Aeliari quarters, alone, thinking, remembering. She could still feel the warmth of his hand. The emotions that had poured into her mind weren't violent. They were alive. They made her heart, if she could call it that, beat faster. For the first time in her life, she was afraid to let go of a feeling. Her people were worried. Inside a tall silver chamber, Aeliari leaders held a meeting. The crystal walls shimmered with shifting patterns of data. Advisor Sarek stood before the council. The princess has been changed, one elder said, his voice flat and cold. Sarek bowed slightly. She is seeing truth, perhaps for the first time. Truth? Another said. That humans are wild, emotional, unstable? They are emotional, Sarek replied, but not unstable. The princess believes they may be what we have forgotten. The council murmured in concern. If she continues down this path, the first elder warned, she may bring ruin to our place in the Concord, or she may bring light back to our people, Sarek said quietly. Elsewhere in the station, Elias Reese sat at a long table with other human delegates. Everyone was tense. Earth's seat in the Concord was not secure. The council had delayed the final decision. Many species now feared that humans were too emotional, too unpredictable to join. We're on thin ice, one diplomat whispered. If one more thing goes wrong, they'll throw us out. Elias kept quiet. His thoughts were still with Virelia. Later that day, a private message reached him. It was short and clear. Meet me at the light garden. Midnight. Come alone. At midnight, Elias entered the light garden, a hidden room filled with floating plants that glowed like tiny suns. The air was still and the lights dimmed softly when he stepped in. Virelia stood in the center, her back to him. You came? She said without turning. I wasn't sure I should, he replied. I wasn't sure either, she said. Then she turned to face him. But I needed to see you one more time before the decision is made. Elias stepped closer. What are you thinking? She paused. About my people, about yours. We have lived in peace for centuries, but at a cost. We locked our feelings away. We lost our music, our stories, even our laughter. She looked into his eyes. You reminded me of what we were, of what we might be again. Elias gave a small smile. So, are you saying you like us? She laughed, softly, like glass wind chimes. It was the first time he had heard an Aliari laugh. I'm saying I believe you belong here, but others do not agree. Some want your people banned before the final vote. Elias nodded. I guessed as much. Too much fire, right? She stepped forward. Your fire? It scares them. But to me, it feels like freedom. There was silence between them for a moment. The glowing plant swayed gently above. Then Virelia whispered, Would you show me more? Elias raised an eyebrow. More? More of what it means to be human. He thought for a moment. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It was old and simple. An Earth music player. He pressed a button. Soft piano music began to play. Calm, warm, sad, and hopeful all at once. Virelia closed her eyes. Her colors changed with the notes. Blue, gold, violet. She whispered, What is this? It's called music, Elias said. It's what we play when words aren't enough. He stepped forward and held out his hand again. May I? She looked down at his hand, then back into his eyes. Slowly, she took it. Together they stood under the glowing trees, listening to the music. No words, just feeling. For the Aliari princess, this was more than a moment. It was a breakthrough. The next morning, chaos returned. Virelia's private meeting with Elia. The Galactic Concord Summit was the most important event in the galaxy. It only happened once every 100 years. At this summit, new civilizations were tested to see if they were ready to join the great alliance of intelligent species. For the first time, Earth was invited. Captain Elias Ree stood inside the massive hall on the Concord Central Station. He was tall, with sharp eyes and calm nerves. At just 35 years old, he had led peace missions, survived a war zone, and once negotiated with a sentient volcano. But today, none of that mattered. Today, he would represent all of humanity. Around him, the other species of the galaxy watched closely. The hall sparkled with alien technology. Light danced across crystal walls, and gravity shifted to match each species' comfort. In the middle stood the high dais where first contact ceremonies were performed. The air smelled like metal and something sweet, perhaps from the flower-breathing lilacs nearby. Elias took a slow breath. He was ready. The announcer, a floating orb of blue flame called the Vox Herald, rang out, introducing Princess Virelia of the Aliari Empire. Gasps moved through the crowd. The Aliari were one of the most powerful empires in the Concord. They were tall, glass-like beings who shimmered with inner light. Their minds were pure logic, and their emotions, if they had any, were kept hidden. Then she appeared. Princess Virelia walked forward gracefully. She was beautiful in an alien way, tall, glowing, and made of delicate crystal threads. She did not wear clothes. She didn't need them. Her entire body shifted colors gently with her mood, though most Aliari had trained to stay always calm and still. Elias stepped down from his position and approached her. This was the moment, the first meeting between Earth and the Aliari. He had been told, do not touch them. The Aliari found physical contact strange and overwhelming. Even among themselves they rarely touched. But old habits die hard, as Elias stopped in front of her. He smiled politely and did something natural to any Earthling. He extended his hand. A pause. The crowd fell completely silent. Virelia tilted her head slightly. Her advisors behind her tensed. Everyone expected her to step back or scold the human, but instead she looked at Elias's hand for a long moment. And then, very slowly, she reached out her own. Their hands touched. Her fingers were cool and smooth, like glass warmed by sunlight. Elias gave a gentle shake, meaning respect and peace. And then, it happened. Virelia began to tremble. First, it was just a flicker in her hands. Then her whole body shimmered violently. Her glowing threads turned wild colors, blue, gold, violet, and deep crimson. Gasps echoed in the chamber. Her guards rushed forward, but Virelia held up a hand to stop them. She was clearly shaken, but did not fall. Her eyes, if one could call them eyes, were locked onto Elias's face. The Vox Herald floated closer, alarmed. "Captain Elias Reese of Earth, what have you done? Was that a neural attack?" Elias took a step back, shocked. "No, I only shook her hand. That's all I did." The Ailyari ministers surrounded their princess, whispering urgently. Virelia stood still, her light flickering gently now. She seemed to be breathing, if Ailyari even did that. Then she spoke softly. "He is not what they told us," she said. "He is different." Silence. The ministers froze. Elias's translator implant clicked softly as the words repeated in English in his ear. The meaning was clear. Virelia looked at Elias again, her voice like wind through glass. "I felt too much." And with that she turned and walked away slowly, still unsteady, surrounded by her guards. The entire hall remained frozen in disbelief. Elias stood alone in the center, confused, embarrassed, and suddenly, very, very important. Back. In his holding quarters, Elias sat at the edge of a soft alien couch. His thoughts were racing. What had just happened? He replayed the moment again and again. He had just shaken her hand. That was it, a simple handshake. Back on Earth, it was a normal way to say hello, a sign of peace and respect. But to her, it had caused a full-body reaction. A shock. The room door slid open. A Concord officer entered, an insectoid diplomat with 6 arms and serious eyes. "You are under observation," it said. "You may have caused a breach of protocol. Do not attempt further contact with the Ailyari." "I didn't mean to offend," Elias said calmly. "It was just a human gesture." The insectoid nodded. "Perhaps, but some gestures carry deep power when given to the wrong species." Elias leaned back, troubled. Meanwhile, across the station, Virelia sat in her meditation chamber, hands folded tightly. Her advisors begged her to rest, to purge the contact from her mind, to block out the noise. But she shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "I will not forget. There is something in him, something in the humans. A fire, emotion, wild and honest." She trembled again, but not from fear, from wonder. The Concord Council Hall had never been so full. Delegates from 100 star systems gathered to witness the most important vote of the century, whether humanity would be accepted into the galactic Concord or banned forever. Captain Elias A. Reese stood at the center of the hall. His face was calm, but inside his heart beat like a war drum. To his right stood Earth's diplomats. To his left, the Ailyari delegation stood glowing and silent. And at the head of them, calm but powerful, stood Princess Virelia. The council leader, a giant turtle-like being called Grand Mind Baltor, floated forward and spoke. "Humanity has shown both promise and danger. In the past week, the council has seen fear and hope, fire and grace." The Grand Mind turned, his glowing eyes to Elias. "Captain Reese, you will now face the trial of worth." Elias didn't flinch. "What's the trial?" "A series of questions and tests," Baltor said. "You must prove that humanity brings more good than risk. You must show not just strength but wisdom and heart." The first test was called the Mirror of Truth. Elias stood before a floating crystal that glowed softly. When he placed his hand on it, his memories began to show in the air around him, like ghosts. Everyone watched as images appeared. Elias as a child, scared and hiding during a bombing. Elias as a soldier, helping a wounded alien during a war. Elias refusing an order that could have killed civilians. Elias shaking hands with Virelia, for the first time. The mirror spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. Do you regret anything? Elias swallowed hard. Yes, I've made mistakes, but I try to learn from them. The mirror paused. Do you believe your species is ready to join the stars? Elias looked up. We are not perfect, but we dream. We build. We rise again after every fall. That's what makes us human. The mirror shined bright for a moment. Then it turned green, the sign of truth. Cheers broke out from the human side. Even some neutral species clapped their tentacles or buzzed happily. The second test was harder. It was called the test of empathy. Elias was taken to a small room where a hostile alien creature waited. A young Granzul, wounded and afraid. Its race had once fought against humans during a resource war. The guards told Elias, "It does not speak your language. It fears your kind. You must calm it without weapons or tools. If it attacks, you may defend yourself. But that will end the trial." Elias nodded and entered the room. The Granzul growled low, its 4 red eyes burning. It bared its sharp teeth. Elias slowly knelt down, lowering himself to look less threatening. He didn't speak. He only sat still, calm, and slowly reached into his pocket, not for a weapon but for a small, round object, a glowing ball he used to play with his nephew back on Earth. He rolled the ball gently across the floor. The Granzul stared at it. Then slowly, it stepped forward and touched the ball. Elias smiled. "I guess play is a universal language," he said softly. The creature didn't understand the words, but it understood the feeling. The trial room watched, through hidden screens. When Elias came out, the council was silent. Then Grandmind Baltor spoke again. The human shows empathy even to former enemies. He understands more than words. A few more species turned in favor of Earth, but not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of the council chambers, a group of secret enemies whispered to each other. They were part of the Anti-Human Alliance, a hidden group that feared Earth's passion and potential. They believed emotions were dangerous, and humans were full of them. One of them, a cloaked insectoid named Krelzax, said, "We cannot let them pass the final test. If we do not stop them now, the galaxy will burn." They planned to sabotage the final trial. The last challenge was called the choice. Elias and Virelia were brought to a platform in the center of the chamber. 2 orbs floated above them, one gold, one black. The Concord explained, "These orbs represent 2 futures. The gold orb will give Earth a seat in the Concord, but Aliari will be forced to leave for breaking old laws. The black orb will protect the Aliari place in the Concord, but Earth will be denied entry. The choice belongs to the human and the princess untogether." Gasps filled the room. Elias stared at the orbs. "Wait, only one of us can stay?" Virelia's hands trembled again. "It's a test," she whispered, "to see what we're willing to lose." Elias looked at her. "You fought for us. You risked everything. And you made me feel something I thought was lost forever," she said quietly. Elias closed his eyes. The future of Earth rested on one choice, but so did hers. Slowly he reached toward the black orb. "I won't let you lose your home for us," he said. Virelia gasped. "No, you can't." But before he could touch it, she reached out and grabbed his hand. "No," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "We choose together." And then they both touched the space between the orbs. For a second, nothing happened. Then the orbs merged. A brilliant white light exploded through the chamber. Gasps turned into stunned silence. The Concord Council looked at the merged orb, now shining brighter than any test before. Grandmind Baltor spoke slowly. They have broken the test. They chose unity over sacrifice, connection over fear. For the first time in conquered history, the trial has evolved. Then he turned to the entire chamber. Humanity and Aeliari are now bound in purpose. Let the stars welcome both. Cheers thundered across the chamber. Elias turned to Virelia. She smiled, a real, warm, human-like smile. I don't understand what just happened, he said. You didn't have to, she replied. You just had to feel it. The white orb continued to shine for hours after the trial of worth ended. No one touched it, no one dared. The council chambers were filled with silence, the kind of silence that comes before history is written. Elias Reese stood at the edge of the platform looking up at the brilliant sphere. Princess Virelia stood beside him, her colors glowing. Softly, her eyes filled with something no one had seen in an Aeliari for hundreds of years. Hope. Later that day, a great ceremony was held. All the Concord delegates gathered again, but this time, the mood had changed. The fear in their voices had turned to curiosity. The anger had turned into wonder. Grandmind Baltor floated forward and raised his large three-fingered hand. Let it be known, he said, that the trial of worth has shown something new. Not just strength, not just empathy, but unity. A bond that rewrites the rules of the stars. He turned toward Elias and Virelia. You have given us something we forgot. You reminded the Concord how to feel and how to dream. The Grand Mind placed a shining silver ring on Elias's hand, the mark of galactic membership. Then he turned to Virelia and gave her a symbol made of crystal and light, a sign of her role as ambassador of new unity. Cheers echoed across the hall. Humanity was no longer alone. After the ceremony, Elias and Virelia stood together in the sky gardens above the station. The stars stretched wide in every direction. It was peaceful now. You did it, she said softly. No, Elias said. We did it. She looked at him with a small smile. When I first touched your hand, I felt fire. It frightened me. I noticed, Elias said, laughing lightly. But now I understand, she continued. Your fire was not to destroy. It was to warm the cold places. He nodded. And you showed me that calm doesn't mean weakness. You showed me control, grace. They stood in silence for a while. Above them, the stars twinkled like 1,000 tiny watchers. Finally, Elias said, So what now? What happens after the galaxy changes? Virelia took a step closer. We learn. Together. Your people and mine. Maybe all of us. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Humanity was welcomed into the Concord officially, not just as visitors or traders, but as builders, thinkers, dreamers. New programs were launched between Earth and Aeliari cities. Science and art were shared. Human children read HFY stories in school. Aeliari artists painted using human color theory, but not everyone was happy. Some species still feared what had happened. Some whispered that humans would bring war, again. Others believed emotions should be kept locked away. So a new council was formed, the Circle of Balance, to make sure peace and passion would grow side by side. Elias was invited to be one of its founding members, but he said no. 1 month later, Elias stood aboard a small human-built starship. The stars drifted slowly by the window. The ship wasn't big, just enough for two. Virelia sat beside him, no longer wearing the royal uniform, but a simpler robe. Her colors were soft today, warm gold and soft lilac. You're sure about this? She asked. He smiled. I've been sure since the moment your hand trembled. She looked away, a little embarrassed. I didn't know what I was feeling. You were feeling life, he said gently. Same thing I felt. They were going on a journey. Not a mission, not a war, a voyage, across unknown stars, to the edge of the mapped galaxy. They had one goal, to find forgotten species, lost colonies, and ancient wisdom, to learn more about life, to keep building the bridge between emotion and reason, fire and ice, heart and mind. It was called Project Dawnfire. Are you ready?